However, it turns out that this is, of course, a fundamental mistake to think that once you create open entry into every government position that you have equality before the law. What actually happens is that if we substitute a democracy for a monarchy, is we replace personal privileges restricted to the king and queen and so forth, with functional privileges that are given to public officials. But in fact, the distinction between higher law and a lower law exists under democracy just as much as it exists under monarchy, in the form of two different types of law. One that we call public law, that covers, so to speak, the actions of public officials, and private law that covers the activities of private citizens. As a private citizen, you may not steal. As a public official, however, covered by public law, you can steal. As a private citizen, you may not enslave somebody else. On the other hand, if you do the same as a public official, draft somebody into the army, for instance, then that is perfectly all right. If you steal from somebody and give it to somebody else, that is fence-stolen goods, this is considered to be under private law a crime. If you do it as a public official, it's called redistribution of income. So under public law, you can do certain things that under private law would be considered to be illegal. So the distinction between two types of law still exists under democracy just as much as it exists under monarchy. So now we come then to the question, what is the right answer to the question of how do we enforce the rules that I initially mentioned? Self-ownership, first use, first own principle, producer owns whatever he has produced, and the rule of you can acquire properties through voluntary exchange. And the correct answer is the enforcement of these rules has to occur by individuals and agencies that are bound by the same rules as everybody else. That is, we need a society where the only type of law that is in existence is private law. No such institution that is covered by public law, which, of course, as I explained, is a misnomer. That is not public law. That is just law or criminal activities masquerading as law. Now, this, if the enforcement of these rules also has to occur by individuals and agencies bound by the same rules, involves then two things. On the one hand, unlimited rights to self-defense must be permitted. And the immediate implication, of course, of this is that private ownership of weapons and guns must be permitted in any free society. Despite everything that we always hear from governments in terms of contrary propaganda, there is an intuitively sensible rule that says the more guns there are, the less crime will exist. And the Wild West, contrary to what some movies insinuate, is a clear indication of the fact that this is indeed the case. If people own guns, private ownership of guns is unrestricted, then there will be less crime. But in complex societies, of course, we will not want to provide for our own security only by our own means. We do not make our own suits or shoes. We rely on the division of labor in this regard. And of course, in every complex society, we would want to rely on division of labor, on specialized agencies and agents also when it comes to the protection of private property rights. And a very important role in a free society when it comes to the protection of these rules that I mentioned before would be insurance agencies, and associated with insurance agencies, directly or indirectly, police, detective, and arbitration agencies. Now, what would be the result of this? And a very brief comparison between the state provision of security and the provision of security by privately funded, freely funded insurance operations. The first thing would be there would be a drastic fall in the price that we have to pay for security. As I explained, the tendency for under monopolistic provision of security is the price of security always goes up. We have to pay more and more, and we get lower and lower quality of protection. Precisely the opposite would occur if there were competition in this area. Insurance companies would indemnify you in case they fail in the task that they have accepted in return for you paying a premium. Governments, on the other hand, monopolists, of course, do not indemnify you if they fail. If somebody steals from you, robs you, mistreats you, and so forth, the government will not come and say, look, we failed in what we promised to do, and because we failed you, we will offer you compensation of such and such an amount. I have at least never heard of any government anywhere doing anything like this, and I'm sure that you have never heard anything like this also. Why would insurance companies be good at this? They would be good at prevention of crime, because whatever they can prevent, they would not have to pay up for it. A government police officer, on the other hand, if he does fail to prevent a crime, he gets his salary paid no matter what. And in this situation, it is of course better to hang around at 7-Eleven stores than just trying to prevent what he's supposed to prevent. When it comes to the next thing that we want is we want things that have been stolen, taken from us and so forth, returned to us if at all possible. What is the incentive of governmental police to find stolen goods, to find the loot? Anyone who has any experience with this knows that the police will file a report, and then you ask them, what will you do about these goods, and they will say, no, we'll file it away. And that's the end of the story. By accident, sometimes things might be recovered, but only by accident. What incentive, on the other hand, exists for insurance companies to recover things? The answer is because they otherwise have to indemnify you. Of course, they have a financial incentive to recover whatever they can recover at reasonable cost. I had an acquaintance whose VW got stolen in Italy. He went to the Italian police and asked them, what will you do about it? And they said, nothing. And then he reported this to an insurance company, and a week later the insurance detective discovered where his car was. And the last thing that you want, of course, is like that the perpetrators of the crime are found and captured, and that they have to compensate the victim. Now, how likely is it that the government finds the perpetrators in capital crimes? Yes, they do occasionally find them, because public opinion pressure is quite high. In crimes of a lesser sort, rarely, if ever, do they apprehend the criminal. And if they do apprehend the criminal, what will they do with the criminal? Will they force the criminal to now compensate the victims? And again, I have never heard of this. Quite to the contrary, they will probably jail the person, and the victim, plus other taxpayers, are forced to even pay for the incarceration of the person who victimized them in the first place. And if I remember correctly, incarceration in the United States per person per year costs about $70,000 or in the neighborhood of this. There you can just engage in physical workouts, you have TV, you can complain if you don't get your right muesli in the morning, and you might even study law to prepare yourself for the next apprehension. You know how to better defend yourself, and all the rest of it. And does the victim ever see a penny out of this? And the answer is, of course, never ever. Would insurance companies operate like this? Imagine an insurance company would tell you, this is the condition under which I insure you. As soon as we apprehend the criminal, we will ask you also just to pay for his incarceration. I don't think that insurance companies would get very far with this type of treatment.